Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Oscar. Rick, today in our Serverless September month, we're going to talk about Cosmos DB because they launched a new serverless offering.
True.
So let's go through the different kinds of Cosmos setup we can make now.
Cool, let's do so. So first of all, Cosmos DB is an awesome tool. It's really fast. It's a NoSQL database. It has a ton of open APIs like SQL or table storage or Mongo or, I mean, there's a lot available.
Gremlin.
Yeah, Gremlin. And then it's an awesome solution. However, sometimes it might get a bit expensive because you have this base level of 400 request units that you provision for your database or container. And then that costs a lot of money. So
yeah, it's built in request units. So that means, well, there's some calculation in what it is. Like a single read point query is one, and the write is 3, I think.
And then one document of 1 kilobyte in a point read, that's one request unit.
So if you, well, for instance, design a bit poorly, you need to scale up, and then it will become a really expensive service, even though it's really cool. So to avoid that and fitting that, there are some different models, right? How to provision.
True. Yeah, so the first one is the free tier they have available now, which means that the first 400 request units and 5 gigs of storage in the account are free each month. Which means that you could have a shared throughput database with a couple of containers in, and they share the request unit per seconds at a database level.
Okay, cool.
So if you want to have free tier, you opt in on that one when creating it. You can have one in your subscription, no more. And the containers of the shared throughput database share those 400 RUs that you have available.
Yeah.
Now, the second solution is something that fits perfectly in our Serverless September, Cosmos DB Serverless, which actually means full consumption-based billing.
Yeah.
And that's awesome, right?
That's cool. But this preview?
It is preview, yes.
So it's also not fully done, let's say. They want some feedback on
Yes.
on how people can use this.
They are tweaking the product.
Yeah. But you can. It's a public preview, so you can make one and start playing around with it.
True.
So it's really doing whatever. What is the limit? What is the don't have a minimum because that's 0 because it's proper serverless. Yeah. What is the max? How can you control it?
Well, actually, when you create a Cosmos DB serverless database, it was the 5,000 the burstability of one container under a serverless database is 5,000 RUs.
Okay.
That's the max that one container can have.
But it's a fixed max then.
Currently there's a fixed maximum.
Okay. So, determining on the amount of feedback on there, they will probably change that.
Yes, true.
Okay, so it has a fixed max on a container.
Yep.
And you can have multiple containers inside a database.
Yes.
Create an account with database, and then you create your containers.
Yep.
And that's also limited, right? I read 25 or not?
Yeah, I probably have this in the gotchas, which are a bit further on in the presentation.
Details, yeah.
Yeah, so let's address those as soon as we see them. But first of all, I would like to see the third option, which is Autoscale, in which Cosmos DB actually automatically and instantly scales the throughput, so the request units per second of your database.
Okay, so this is the slider bar we know.
Yep.
In Cosmos.
Yep.
And at some point it was called Autopilot, I think.
Autopilot, yeah.
And it's just doing it for you.
Yeah, so there's this little gnome somewhere in the Azure portal, which is sliding the slider as soon as you need it.
So if you go above the request units, it will actually serve them for you.
Yes.
And build them instead of limiting you and then scaling up or whatever. It will just go on the fly.
Yep.
But it means that your bill might vary a bit.
Well, actually, as far as I'm concerned, it might vary quite a bit, and that's the third bullet that we see here is the fact that it's cost effective. However, you pay for the needed resources on a per hour basis. I'm going to go into just a little bit more detail later on in the presentation, but that means one big spike in an hour means the entire hour you pay for the max.
Okay.
So there's this thing there.
Good to know.
Yeah. So let's first take it back a step to serverless, because serverless has its limitations. Currently, a serverless account can only run in a single Azure region. Synapse link preview feature is not available. And since you do serverless on a database, specifying throughput or reading throughput or anything that has to do with throughput on a container level, you can't do that. So it will give you an exception if you do that through the API or through the SDK. Because you have an Autoscale database, you can say, okay, and this container has, but that doesn't work.
Okay.
Sorry, I said Autoscale, I meant serverless.
Serverless.
So if you have a serverless database, you can't do anything on a container level. If you have Autoscale, then you can do stuff on a container level.
But talking about serverless, like I opened the portal because you were talking about it. This is a screen to create a new Azure account, Azure Cosmos DB account.
Yep.
So there's some options. Instead of now you have the capacity mode toggle, and you can put it to serverless. That means also if you toggle that, a lot of choices just go away.
Yeah, you don't need
like
to
the
think about
region and that stuff. You can still determine your region, so if it's region specific. But what I also saw is what we talked about is the free one, right? Apply a free tier discount. So it's indeed a one-off in your whole subscription.
Yep.
If you use it here, it's done. But in combination with the serverless preview, it doesn't count because the free tier discount is for the 400 RUs, which is not in the cards here.
Yes.
Okay. And like I created the serverless one now. I have it on a different tab. That's this one. I created 2 containers in the database. What I noticed is that normally I have a scale tab here.
True.
And there's no way to actually determine the scale on these containers or on the database.
No,
so this is...
Of course, you do have the scale and settings option that's available there, but again, nothing as far as scale goes.
No, go to the other options indeed. But the actual scale slider that I'm used to, or like an input box, is gone here.
True. Yeah, so that's actually pretty cool. One of the things that we need to take into account is, as we said, a serverless container can have a max burstability of 5,000 RUs. And you can store a max of 50 gigabytes of index and data in a container. Everywhere on the documentation, Microsoft states some of these limitations may be eased or removed when serverless becomes generally available. Please give us feedback at, and then they even specify explicitly an email address. Give us your insights in how you're working with serverless and how it's limiting or helping you, and what can we do to provide an even better service.
Yeah, I can imagine you want to have some more control.
Yeah.
You want the 5,000 a bit higher, or indeed a bit more gigabytes,
or maybe a total max. So never provision over 20,000 RUs for the database.
But on the other hand, like, wouldn't you be better off with the Autoscale feature then? Because you're talking about details and really high level.
True.
And this is for like low usage, or like it's a specific model where you probably don't have that enormous burst, and you don't have the global availability for it and stuff like that. So it certainly has its place.
But you can also feel that they're still trying to find the details of how it can actually earn its place.
Yeah.
Since the free tier is awesome and Autoscale is awesome, serverless is also awesome. However, we need to define what the rules are it has to follow to make sure that it's actually a decent solution.
And like the old rules don't apply. You used to also say, well, your development environment or your acceptance environment or whatever should be the same as your production environment. Like if you're not using any of the other features where you're limited to, you can also say, well, this is my dev environment.
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm hitting the limit, but my users in production are using a different model.
Yeah, true.
So in that case, I can imagine that at least a couple of days and a couple of hours a day, this is not used. So,
true.
Interesting offering. I'm really curious where it will land.
Me too. So we'll keep eyes on how it's performing, and as soon as it's GA, we will come back with you for the details.
Cool.
Now, looking at the scenarios you might have for serverless, it's generally aimed at light traffic because provisioning capacity isn't required, so it might be that you're better off financially. But it does have moderate burstability, so a serverless container cannot have more than 5,000 RUs, as we said earlier. And then the last thing is actually really important. It has moderate performance. It does still run Azure Cosmos DB, so it's still fast. However, there are a few items in performance that are different for serverless than for a normal Cosmos DB, so let's have a look at those. Okay. And the first one is availability. If you have availability zones set off, you only see that we're talking about only now when we have 99.9% SLA, but you only get a 3.9 SLA. Yeah. If you don't have availability zones enabled, and if you do have them, you get 4 nines of SLA. So that's less than the, 5 nines of Cosmos DB in general. And then the latency, they have a service level objective of the 10 milliseconds or less for point reads, but 30 milliseconds or less for writes, where as a normal Cosmos DB, they say that in the 99th percentile.
It's always single digit, right?
Single digit milliseconds. So here for reads, they have 10 milliseconds or less, so that's very close to the single digit. However, 30 milliseconds or less for writes, that means that they are just that little bit slower. And then the burstability, and that's actually a thing, the service level objective there is 95%, which means that the maximum of 5,000 RUs for a container can be attained at least 95% of the time, which means there might be a scenario in which your container asks for 5,000 RUs, but they don't have it.
Still get the throttling there.
Yes.
Okay.
So there is a small option of limitation there. And again, here as well in the documentation, the performance characteristics mentioned above are provided as a preview what this offer will deliver when generally available. Yeah. And here it actually means this might not be the case currently, but as soon as we go GA, this will be how it will perform.
Okay, so this is the actual end result of this service. Okay.
So this is the preview of what this offer will deliver when GA. So that's also, this is actually looking ahead a bit at what the SLAs and SLOs will be.
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes you really need to figure out, like, is this the designed limit, which this is, or is actually it's just preview. And if you assume that, then you run into this later. Yeah,
if you think, well, it's a preview, of course I don't get my my burstability all of the time, and then if you're in production and you get customers that are calling you,
because I'm also really curious, like let's say you start out serverless, and you might want to upgrade later. I don't think there is probably a switch right now, because you also need to specify it up front, and you don't see the scale option. But that would be something I would definitely give as feedback, like give me the option to go to the normal capacity model, because my business now is in production and it's running, or I have too many developers to use this. So interesting.
Yeah, that is actually something that we might give them as feedback. Yeah. So the new support for spiky and unpredictable workloads, it can offer savings of up to 70%, is what Microsoft states themselves. Again, as we said with a couple of services already, this is something that we need to get used to, need to start using. We need to know, we need to get our hands on it, and we need to feel how it actually works before we can.
We have those preview products for that we can do that.
Well, I've been playing around with it. Last slide here is, there's of course a couple of serverless workloads that you could use. This is actually what they tell you where it's aimed at, and that's development, testing, prototyping, or proof of concept. But also, if something is non-critical or it has light traffic, then serverless could be the way to go. So for instance, you have that Azure Functions API running against stable storage in a storage account, but you want the global scale of Cosmos DB, you can use then serverless. However, if you have a high productivity and availability production environment, then maybe serverless might not be the way to go, at least as far as Microsoft goes. Yeah. Currently, they say we're in preview, so it's not production ready at all.
Yeah, but one man's light traffic is the other man's heavy traffic. So this is Cosmos DB, which is scales to infinity.
Yes.
So I can think of a lot of scenarios that are pretty medium.
Yeah, me too.
But will really benefit, and I really hope that this opens up this service for those segments in the market.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of times like, well, we calculated it, or I have some experience where we put the RUs too high. Let's not do this, because the rest of our services is a fraction of the cost comparing to the Cosmos DB.
Yeah.
Even though it would be the correct solution in that case of the application you're building. Yeah. So I would like to see this much more, because I saw Mongo popping up everywhere for really small sites.
Yep.
And why not? Like if this scenario is there and we have a nice option for it, pretty good.
I agree. Do you wanted to show the Autoscale database, because you also created that one, right?
Well, there was one I already had for a demo. I created the Autoscale DB in it. What you can do indeed, there's the throughput. As you can see on my screen, this is the one we are using. Used to be set on manual.
Yep.
Put the Autoscale in there, and you put it there to 4,000, and that's the minimum, because that is the maximum actually, but that's the maximum you can specify, because the normal minimum of a container or a database there is the 400 RUs.
Yeah.
And that is the minimum limit that it needs, and you cannot go under that. So it's always the 10% of that total. So if you put it to 8,000, it will be 800 DTU minimum by default. So they're in pair.
Oh, you said DTUs.
I said DTUs, RUs. Yeah, we have RUs, vCores, DTUs.
Gigabyte
That's
seconds.
why I need specialists.
Yeah.
You can just specify. You can switch easily from the two models here. In this case, I actually set up an Autoscale on the DB, and in one of the containers, or in the container, I found out that this is the Autoscale, and if I go to the container, I cannot scale that. This is the default scale for this one. Sorry, I cannot show this right now. But of course, within you can set it up with the database, but also if you throw in a couple of containers there, and one is, or like 9 of them are 400, like it's some data that gets cached and it's everywhere, whatever. And you have the one that's really interactive and really spiky. You can put the Autoscale on that one, or you can put the specific scale on that one, and then of course you can use the Autoscale. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool, by the way.
This is really cool. Like, you have to know what you're doing, because you can put everything on Autoscale to 10,000. But then it's always a surprise. I like surprises, but not these kinds of surprises.
True. I do have just a couple of gotchas for the services that are now on the Cosmos DB. So as far as free tier goes, you're limited to 5 shared throughput databases.
Okay.
And you can have maximum of 1 free tier account per Azure subscription, as we said. So you opt in on creation. You showed the toggle. If you look at serverless, it's currently preview, so there's no SLA. It's not recommended for production. And this is kind of a big gotcha, currently it's only supported on Azure Cosmos DB Core.
Okay,
which
so
is
the SQL endpoint. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. That is what used to be the document DB where this all started.
Yeah.
So we cannot get the serverless for the MongoDB now?
At this point, no. Currently, it's only supported for Azure Cosmos DB Core.
Okay, interesting.
So that was something that I wanted to throw in there. That's it for now.
Yeah, if we find out anything, if this thing goes GA, we will probably do a new recording, write a blog or whatever with the details, because they will matter in this case.
Yeah, and if you have any additions or something that we missed, just put them in the comments and we'll find them there.
That's good. Thank you.
For now, thanks. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.